thank you for inviting me to present today from local to global. And let me try this. And, 2020 in a nutshell. Basically, it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. We know why it was the worst of times, don't have to go there. But why was it the best of times? We basically, it was a time for exponential growth on every single respecting technology, from telemedicine to to edutech to entertainment. Everywhere you go, you could actually see the exponential growth of technologies. And if you were a startup, right, if you were a small company or a small organization, you suddenly realize that you're basically, now you have customers all over the world. Even conferences like this and Grace Hopper and Society of Women Engineers, they all grew tremendously. They have now a global audience. Then today we're going to talk about how is the process when you first start, a product, and how you basically jump into serving an international market. Then we'll discuss, what it takes, how does it look like. I'll share what it takes to do an international minimum viable product. How do you go about growing it? And I'll share, a case study, all in 20 minutes. Then basically, if you're familiar with startups, when you are when you first start, you create your minimum viable product, that it just includes just a few use cases. And when you get to about $4 million, then that's when you basically start to need to exponentially grow. You need to start to show that you have the infrastructure to reach the international markets. And this is when investors are basically looking for your international strategy. Then, the technology landscape today is incredibly complex, right? Just think about it. All the different technologies are converging at this point. And then beyond having the money, you basically have to decide what is going to be your exit strategy. You're going to basically go and sell, once you start growing, or, you basically want to go and, keep up the product and grow from the very bottom. Then how does that look like? When you first start working on your product, even though you don't even have an international strategy yet, you basically have to think about just creating the basic infrastructure. Then if you think about it, in your phase zero, you are basically just starting to create like a minimum viable product. As you start to decide that you're going to scale into the international market, you basically select, a few markets that you want to go in, and you decide which user stories are you going to be handling. And then you get to like a tier 2 level. One is like, a tier 1, maybe Canada and Australia, just English speaking markets, but that basically have different currencies. But in a phase 2, you're going to think about maybe the EU, where you basically are handling different languages and, one currency and so on. And then finally, you basically end up thinking, okay, I'm going to be ready for the world, and I'm going to have like all my infrastructure ready to go. Then with that, then if you don't do all what I'm saying from the very beginning, if you don't do the strategy from the very beginning, you are going to basically have to go back and refactor, all your code, your business project, your processes, and everything to make it actually work. And, this actually takes a lot of time. I have examples of actually quite a few companies that didn't think about into the Middle East markets, and they basically had to go and refactor everything to support bilingual languages. And that took them a couple of years. And that's basically lost time in a market opportunity. Beyond that, once you start to think about your product, it's not only your application, but you're going to have to think about like the website, your web app, all your operational, your sales, your business processes, legal. If you're familiar with the GDPR and all the compliance laws that exist actually all around the world, then you have to think about that. You have to think about customer success. How are you going to respond to customer questions? And, and how you're going to market and PR, and establishing also different prices for your different markets. And then with that, now that you have got your strategy, that you decide that you basically want to do that, your investment, you basically have to go about creating your international minimum viable product, your minimum viable MVP. Then for some of you who are not familiar with this nomenclature, M is for marketization, G is for globalization, I is for internationalization, and L is for localization. And basically, the more you invest in your product and enabling into all the different international markets and languages, the more you can scale. Then this is how this goes. Then this is the secret sauce. And your international minimum product has to be fast, has to be simple, and has to be good enough. And I'll go into what that means. Then you start with defining, and all about the MVPs is always focus. And you have to decide what languages and markets and platforms and browsers you're going to be, creating. What and basically a use case. A use case can be your first time user experience. You basically install the app, you go and you do just the absolutely minimum. You enter your name, you enter your email address, and then you may want to select your language, right? Then no business processes. We don't care about that much right now about all the other components that impact the organization, but just the app itself. Then with that, then you basically define, as I mentioned, your user story, right? It's like if you're going to provide like a default locale, it's like, are we going to default everybody to English and then they can change it? So they can basically change it. They can go into registration, the landing page, just one feature that we're going to be providing, for international enablement, that if the user decides to switch the language, how can they do that? And, a confirmation email. Then this basically, with this use case, you basically touch like the differentiation. Then how do you do that behind just behind the stage? Then, starting from the database and all your files and all your notifications, all basically your cloud infrastructure, wherever you're sitting, everything has to be enabled, right? Everything has to be Unicode, and ensuring that we have all the different language directories and so on. Then we basically are not going to go and try to reinvent the wheel. Ideally, we use a library off the shelf, and there's a few use, but this library is actually incredibly heavy. Then if we're just going to do it for a couple of languages or a couple of the markets, then we just use a subset of the library, right? And the same for the platform API. Then this will allow us to basically just enable our minimum viable product, and we end up with our app, and then we're going to be able to capture some analytics. We do some minimum scripting just to automate, some of the localization processes. Use a third-party localization vendor that will allow us just to, get some of the strings translated. And talking about that, you can kind of like double cheat, cheat a little bit and just do, Google Translate. And we all know that is not ideal, but at least allows you to test some basic, scenarios and some selected use cases. Use false doors and just do your A/B testing. And remember what I said about that. The MVP just needs to be good enough. Then this is basically what our fidelity is. And now that we have our MVP, we have tested it into a couple of selected markets. We're set to get some of the analytics. We can basically figure out how we're going to scale and how we're to continue to do the continuous globalization. Then we basically, after we implement, we test on markets, we evaluate, we tune, and we analyze. And we basically have to repeat this a number of times. When I was at Microsoft, we went from 0 to 165 markets, like in 18 months. Then this is the process that you do it. You do it basically in stages, and you start just with a few, languages, and then you just keep iterating and increasing your market reach. And then we need to ensure that we have just some basic tools. We have our scripts, we have our dashboards to understand what's going on. We have created the pseudo localization with Google Translate. And then we basically interact with the translation management system and the vendor portals. Then all this is integrated into our international development process. Just as an example, I was one of the things I was working with this small startup, and all of them have many similar challenges. They don't have the money. By the way, translations are cheap. They never think about it like, oh, I can't expand internationally because more translations are expensive. No, translations are cheap. Time. People don't have time to spend on the international. The team may not have the the technical capabilities to do that, right? Because they are basically they don't know how to internationalize. They are pushed into so many different directions, and especially ship, and international may not be a focus, right? And then there's like all the technical challenges that exist with launching an international product. Then all of them share these. Then you basically have to ensure that you try to skip these and just go directly into the day one approach. And what that means is that, you basically create an architecture from the beginning that is going to be scalable from day one, that you use just some basic, standard best practices, right? That you train the engineers about what it basically, they need to know for enabling the application, about Unicode, about what they need to do about the string externalization and so on. And then, basically understanding who's going to be your partners or partners in localization, and also evaluating whether you're going to have it in-house or outside house. And then finally, how you're going to basically make this public. Just some basics. Then this was this was a little startup that I worked with. Then basically this startup was based in Poland, and they wanted to start, scaling into, some European markets. And, I basically, when I first started working with the CEO, I wanted to make sure that we understood which was going to be our success metrics, and understand, basically prepare, not only the engineering team, but the whole company to be ready for market scalability, right? Then we decided, based on some deals, what operating systems we were going to do, what browsers, what our landing page was going to be, how we were going to be paying for in the international currencies, and just deciding what were going to be our selected user stories. And, we decided that we were going to do just some low fidelity, as I said, doesn't have to be perfect, in English and Polish, just to get the basics started. And then that we wanted to basically automate the localization as much as possible, because that's one area that really saves you a lot of time once you basically write the localization scripts that, you know, that feed into the TMS. Then, you know, that's something that you want to invest in. And then that we wanted to have a positive impact. You know, I have seen many companies that basically invest a tons of money into going international and then they don't see results. Then we basically wanted to have a baseline and understand what were going to be our metrics. And then from there, you know, say, well, you know, if I increase the number of users who come from in the tunnel in the website, then, you know, that is like a positive indication that, you know, we're getting traction in that particular market, even if we are not seeing the revenue yet. You know, that may take, you know, 1 or 2 years to get there. But, you know, this is just an example. Then today, you know, I wanted to cover very quickly, you know, that the global strategy, you have to think about it from day one. You know, you have to start small with your minimum viable product and then scale. And that you realize that, you know, if you decide to ignore internationalization, then later you're going to pay through legacy refactoring, because that's like a super expensive. And then once you create, you know, your basic infrastructure, you can basically go and scale through continuous globalization solutions.